Getting to know Sam Varnerin on Cuddle podcast. Welcome back, my beautiful listeners. I hope you all are doing well. It's summertime in the northern hemisphere of the world. I recorded this interview with Sam in May 2023. If you are listening to this episode on Patreon, thank you for supporting me. I upload podcast episodes there 3 days before the rest of the world. I love reading your sweet comments on Patreon. I've yet to have an interviewee tell me that they gained a Cuddle client who listened to an episode of my podcast and then realized, oh wait, this interview guest lives in my area. I'm gonna go book them. But fingers crossed, that will happen at some point in the future. It's a small world, right? How do you say cuddling in your language? We're stuck in legal limbo because sex work isn't decriminalized yet. Why is there a Wikipedia page for cuddle parties, but not for professional cuddling? No, Felicity, it's facilitator, not felicitator. It's not a replacement for therapy, but it is therapeutic. If you are brand new to my podcast, hello, my name is Felicity. I've been a professional cuddler since March of 2018. I've been a podcast host since late 2019. If you are a professional cuddler who is interested in being interviewed on my podcast, please email me. I am open to having a preliminary phone call with you, although that is not mandatory. And yes, I do send my guests questions through email before we hit record. The preliminary phone call is like a mock interview. I get to know you, you get to know me. I explain the administrative stuff, like I will not use video footage of you without your consent. I always let my guests choose which photo of their face to use on my socials. And even if you aren't a cuddle practitioner, I'm sure you will enjoy listening to this interview. Samantha Varnerin is a professional cuddler who serves the Boston area. Boston is a coastal city located in the northeastern region of the United States. That region is commonly referred to as New England because that's where the English first colonized North America. Sam began professional cuddling in 2015. After 2 years of cuddling part-time, Sam chose to cuddle full-time. Sam has taught boot camps like the 3-day virtual one I attended in February 2023. In Sam's words, professional cuddling is heart-centered work, unquote. Alongside Lisa Meese from Holding Space, I don't know if they're still in business. Lisa and Sam presented a panel together at the 2018 Cuddle Expo. Someone really needs to revive that convention, but it's not me. Sam has taught women-only cuddle workshops and cuddle workshops for all genders. Sam is literally the only cuddle provider I'm aware of who teaches women-only cuddle workshops. So if you're in Somerville, Massachusetts, please attend Sam's cuddle workshops at Arts in the Armory this summer.
My name is Sam Varnerin. I'm based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been a professional cuddler for 7.5 years, full-time for 6.5 of them. I run the website Snuggle with Sam and Cuddle Career. It's about to go defunct because we're having an awkward change in what we're using for our UX design, but I also run Find a Cuddler. I was previously a construction engineer. Literally 10 years ago was when I graduated. I just got all the on this days on Facebook, which was wild to me. I'm like, oh gosh, somewhat of an unlikely shift to go from here to professional cuddling, but I really got a spark of like ambition with the industry within that first year because I noticed just how lacking education, especially around like safety for young women was. And unfortunately I had some of my own experiences around that. After that, I was just like, screw this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want other people to have to deal with it. I'm going to do everything I can to try to like make this stuff available so that people don't have to deal with the things that I've been dealing with. It's been a balancing act for sure to have a full practice and also mentor. I actually also got another notification that 5 years ago, the first iteration of Snuggle School got created. So I'm on version 3 now. Yeah, I run a 7-week mentorship program called Snuggle School, and I do that once a year.
I will say one of the great things about our work is that people from all walks of life can start doing it. Jasmine told me that she also was working in construction. They're very, very different industries. industries, but she developed a lot of transferable skills, like working in a field where you mainly talk to men. I'm sorry that those awful things happened to you, but I commend your resilience. You've been doing this since 2016, right?
October 2015 was when I started. Keely's been in it longer than me, and so has Anna Joy Reedy.
Have you lived in Massachusetts the entire time you've been a cuddle therapist?
Lived, define lived, because at one point during 2018, when I was still trying to figure out what the heck I was doing in business, I just decided to go across the country for like 3 months and basically plot myself down in major cities that somebody else had told me, like, oh yeah, these are all the popular cities for professional cuddling. So I just spent 2 weeks in each one over the course between like June and Labor Day. The first week was really just to be like, okay, what's the culture in this city? And then the second week was, okay, let's work with clients and also meet other people in this city. I would probably say I've mostly worked in Massachusetts for the most part, with the exception of that, a couple trips out to Philly for a short while because there was a big demand there and there wasn't many people fulfilling that demand. And then a couple times I've been flown out to go cuddle with people.
That sounds so exhilarating. I've been on only a few vacations that lasted for 2 weeks, and I really missed home by the end of the 2 weeks. I can't possibly imagine going on a work vacation for about 3 months. I've considered doing that this year, but I decided to push it back to next year. May I ask, what cities did you go to besides Philadelphia during that nomadic stint?
I started in New York City. I hated New York City. I was so far in the black in New York City. That's when I went to Philly, and then I went to Detroit briefly, flew back for a wedding, went back out to Chicago. I liked Chicago a lot. Then went down to Austin. Austin was rough. And then I went to Denver. I was originally going to go out to LA too, but by the time I started booking the tickets for that, I was already partway through the tour. I was just like, I just want to go home, actually. I hear you when you're like, I feel like I'd be homesick. I was homesick. I was trying to book a cuddler while I was out there because I was just like,
How does cuddling in Massachusetts differ from, say, the Midwest?
So we're a smaller state. When I was out in the Midwest, I found that people were willing to drive very far to see you. When I was in Detroit, one of the first clients I saw was coming from Ohio. He was driving all the way out to Ohio to do a 4-hour session with me. And I was like, really? There's nobody else around. Like, Cleveland's right there. That's also a pretty decent-ish cuddle city. And he's like, nope, want to see you. And I was like, okay. When I was out in Chicago, some man from Wisconsin came out too. And when I started talking with a few other cuddlers in the area, the general idea I got was like, oh yeah, no, we're always driving around anywhere anyway, so it's just a 4-hour drive, whatever. Yeah, we don't do that in Massachusetts. I mean, I just came out of a session with a woman that's in the city. She doesn't have a car. A lot of the people in inner Boston proper might not have cars, and my cuddle room is just outside the city. Yes, there's a bus there. Yes, they can take an Uber there, but navigating like that, when I took my cuddle space outside of the city, which was where I lived before, and when I was working out of my own space, I lost a couple of my clients that were in the city, and because the cost for me to go to them was also very high. So I was like, how are we navigating this? Also, I think more people, because the cost of living is so high, it's pretty common for people to have roommates well into like their 30s or 40s here. Them being able to host in their space is not really an option all the time. And for the most part, if somebody has a roommate and they're having a hard time getting to me, it's like, there are other practitioners in the area. I wish I can help you, but good luck otherwise. And I feel bad that I can't do more, but it's also like, especially this year, I recently decided that I really just want to stay in my room, because if I'm traveling all the time to various clients, it's exhausting for me. So what I actually see more often is people outside the city, people coming from like New Hampshire or like the border of Vermont or Maine, because they're right off the highway and drive down and see me. Bonus is that there's plenty of parking here, so they don't have to worry about going into the city and trying to figure out parking. So it's very interesting because like the culture's kind of condensed here, and it varies from like almost municipal to municipal. Definitely part of some of the redlining that they did well in the 90s, which is not a fun thing. So there is some culture stuff going on there as well.
I have not been to Boston since I was a little girl, but I should definitely go back. I don't know if he's listening to this, but I have this one regular who splits his time between LA and Boston. He told me that he has cuddled with you before, and he said only positive things about you. I don't often get clients who are like, yeah, I've cuddled you and I've cuddled this other person you know who also happens to be about 3 time zones away.
Well, I'm glad he's only had wonderful things to say, because I recently did a survey with some of my clients clients, and I've had a lot of great things feedback to hear. But then I also got some jarring feedback from somebody that, like, based on the information he gave me, it was like, oh, this might have been from 2018, which I've learned a lot since then. But man, it's really eye-opening to see just how much I didn't know looking back. It's like, oh yeah, no, what you're saying and the criticisms you have are totally not okay. I don't do those anymore, but oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I do wonder sometimes if there were people that I saw when I first started or the first couple years that I was just completely clueless how much they were just annoyed about their session, because that just went right over my head.
Let me get this clear. So you recently sent out an anonymous survey to a bunch of people in your mailing list, and there were people who literally have not seen you since 2018 responding to that survey?
One person.
That's, wow.
I'm surprised that he was still on my mailing list, honestly. He's like, wow, you really didn't enjoy seeing me, but you are still getting emails from me. There's an unsubscribe button. You don't have to keep hearing from this person that you don't like. But I take all the feedback seriously, though, like even the negative ones, because I do want to see how I can improve and how I have improved too.
I've never had a newsletter, much less a survey, for my Cuddle practice. I'm curious, how do you come up with ideas for emails? Because I'm sure you have a goal, like send out 2 newsletter emails per month or per week, something like that.
That's a really good question. Can I ask you a question about this then?
Yes.
What mailing lists are you on that are memorable to you?
I am a part of this one person's mailing list where she has a blog. I don't ever read her blog. I just read her emails. She blogs about having trichotillomania, which is this OCD where you compulsively pull your hair. Despite being a compulsive disorder that 1 in every 20 or 30 people have, I rarely hear people, even doctors, talk about it. So it's nice to remind myself that there are people talking about this who aren't toxic, because I've joined like Facebook groups about this and I found them to be very toxic. I'm a part of this one YouTuber's newsletter, and she has a YouTube channel all about being a self-published author. I would love to do what she does. One of the things that makes her newsletter memorable is that she has a pet dog. She's really cute. And so she'll talk about the usual, like, this is what I uploaded to my channel this week, but then also, here's a pup date. My dog has been doing this. It's just like totally unrelated to the self-publishing world, but I love dogs.
I don't blame you. I try to fit my puppy in every so often without making her the center of attention, because I want people to focus on me, not the dog. But also, she's so freaking cute. You've seen pictures of my dog, Kissa. She's adorable. It sounds like there's a base of things to talk about from that. So even with my clients, when they come in, like, they share like what has gotten them to come in, what is kind of the struggles they're having in their life. And I've done a lot of my own personal development work. I mean, I don't think you can be in this work for a length of time without having to look inwards at yourself and do some self-development work. I've collected a lot of my own lessons over the years, and sure, there's some things that I don't realize until after a session that I'm like, you know what, I kind of wish I shared something like this there, but this was on my mind. So a lot of it is really a combination of what's inspiring to me that week, either from my clients or from somewhere else, which sometimes it's something as simple as like my switching scheduling software just blew up, but it ended up being a much simpler fix. So I just talked about how that happened, and it's like, oh, the hard problem that we're having actually has a much easier solution than we realized. When has this happened in your life? I'd love to know. But I've dubbed the kind of rambly kind of talking about like self-development concepts and work that I throw into my newsletter, I call them samblings, because it's just Sam's ramblings.
That's pretty clever. It's clever. You're a mentor, and professional cuddling is a skill. Mentoring is a skill. Not every person is cut out to be a mentor. So how did you know that mentoring was something that you could do?
That's an interesting question. I think at first it wasn't that I knew that I could do it as much as that I had a desire to do it. Like, I had an experience of at least low-key kind of a violation and not understanding what to do with it. After sitting with it and being like, okay, nobody's necessarily going to be coming for me to help me in this scenario. I need to be able to step up and tap within to maybe not take control of the situation, but redirect it so that this is a positive. Because unfortunately, in the US, we're not exactly great about boundary injuries as a society, so this was bound to happen again. And so I wanted to make sure that I was able to write the story of how that plays out rather than just freeze up and let whatever happen, because there's too many terrible stories of what that can lead to in the end. So I was like, nope, not going to let that happen. I kind of got ruthless with my own process. And then I was like, well, this I can teach to people. So originally, I had made a course. It was Snuggle Safety Professional Protocols. And I just knew that I could teach other people what I'm doing to keep myself safe and hope that helps them figure out exactly what makes sense to them. Obviously, like that was almost 6 years ago. No, it was 5 years ago because that was 2017, something like that. After that, it kind of every single year that I started seeing more and more clients from various backgrounds, my skills grew and I got more training over the years myself. I never really stopped learning. I mean, I actually just did my taxes and I probably invested like $8,000 last year just in education for myself. And I'm like, wow, how did that happen? It's because I just followed my interest and I was like, oh, this seems like something I want to learn. This is something I want to learn. I think I knew that I wanted to help more people when I started kind of stepping up a bit more just in my own practice and just realizing like I have a lot to share. When I see somebody write a question on a Facebook post, usually I'm like, oh, I have a long answer, but I don't know if I have time to write it all out. So it's like, oh, well, maybe that's not the best way to relay that information all the time. Like I know people have many more questions. That's kind of how Cuddle Career was born. It was like, I want to put more of that there. And the Cuddle Career newsletter has just been the place where I've been like, okay, what's the lesson that I need to teach people right now? As far as individuals and the course as a whole with Snuggle School, that started to come forward more the way that it was maybe about 2 years ago, because I realized there was a lot of gaps in starting as a cuddler that we don't always get. I mean, I didn't do any training for professional cuddling for 2 years. Like it wasn't until then that I literally got plopped into Madeline Guinazzo's house for a training with Keely and then talked with Madeline and she personally invited me to join Cuddlist. And I was like, okay. Still, for 2 years, I was kind of fumbling around trying to figure things out. I know what it's like to be starting and be scared to invest time and resources and money into trying to learn this and thinking, oh, maybe I can just do this myself and learn along the way, which personally I think is probably one of the more expensive ways to learn. I mean, heck, I probably have more than enough therapy sessions that made up for the cost of what I actually paid for it. That kind of helped with me solidifying, like, I want to help people understand this and I'll offer something. And I know what I can offer for free for people so that they can at least take the first couple steps. When they start taking those steps and they have more questions, I'm happy to take them and see how else we can help and how I can work with them.
I just love what you do. I'm so grateful that you're doing what you're doing because I had an amazing experience in your 3-day boot camp in February of this year. I wish I had access to that back in 2018 when I started. I am glad that I worked several jobs, normal minimum wage jobs, before I began doing platonic touch therapy. I will say, I don't think what we do is something that someone who has never had a job can do. A lot of what my clients discuss with me is their woes at work. And if I had no other job experience besides this, I think I would struggle to connect with my clients. A question that a lot of people ask me about my work is, so do your clients tell you about their moms being narcissists and complain about this family member and that family member and this one? In my experience, no. I do get a client here and there who's like, my father was a piece of shit, but I don't really hear about the family troubles, which is, I guess, strange because whenever journalists and a small percentage of podcast hosts want to interview me, they're often like, oh, I only want to ask you questions about your clients. I'm not going to ask you questions about yourself. And I'm like, weird, go on. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, and I only want to ask these very specific questions about your clients, like only about their jobs or only about how their parents failed to raise them.
That's not a projection at all, right? Oh my gosh. I started mitigating that a couple years ago. My previous assistant helped me with this. If you look on my site, I have a form that's request to interview me. You have to fill it out and actually look at my FAQs and be honest, like, what do you think of professional cuddling? If you fill it out with, it's great, I don't care. I'm not doing an interview. That's filtered out a lot of YouTubers that are doing like prank shows. I want nothing to do with that. People that haven't even started their businesses, not for cuddling, but for anything. Like I've had people be like, oh, I want to put you on my YouTube YouTube channel. I'm like, cool, where's the link for it? And they're like, well, I haven't started it yet. I'm like, I mean, I want to share this information with everybody. Maybe once you start, we can talk. I want to do this right. But also, there's just so many articles out there about professional cuddling that is just like, this person makes this amount of money per hour to hug people for a living. Isn't this job so weird? That is the summary of so many articles for so many years. It probably wasn't until mid 2020, early 2021 that we just started to see it shift a little bit. It's still out there a lot. I have my Google alerts for Professional Cuddler, so I see what comes over worldwide. So I open it up and I just shut it again because I'm like, this is depressing. Anybody in the news, can you please write an interesting angle for once? I get that you're trying to get the clicks and the SEO, and there's only so many questions that people ask about our field through Google, but can you please put an interesting spin on it for once? That would be nice. Thank you.
I am currently paying a freelancer to create a website for my podcast, and I will say your interview request page has inspired me. I think it's so brilliant how you mandate people fill out these questions before you even respond. It's brilliant. On the topic of news articles, let's say that a cuddle practitioner was interviewed by a journalist, but then they ended up not liking the article that was released about them. What do you think that practitioner should do then?
Really have to think about that because I have seen people that have had articles that they're like, this wasn't super great. I've personally accepted that I cannot control what other people write about me. I've had, I think it was like Black Sports Online had found an article about me, so they decided to write an article about me and ended it with, must be nice being Sam Varnerin. And I was just like, okay, this seems passive aggressive, but like at the same time, I didn't fully understand how they ended up finding me and deciding that it was a great business idea to put anything on me on their site, but they did. For some reason, that also resulted in a lot of clicks going to my site because they linked back to me. That actually ended up being one of the better performing backlinks, and I was very confused because I hadn't seen them ever. The advice I'd probably give is that while it may be hard to process that like maybe this didn't go the way that we would have liked it to, there's actually probably a lot more good in that being out there than you may think, especially because once people actually come to you, you get to control or shape the information that the potential clients get. And sometimes they come from very unlikely places, and some of those best clients just might be from that article that you really didn't like, but they wouldn't have ever heard of you otherwise. But in the meantime, you are totally allowed to rage that they didn't nail it even close. That there have been times that I just like thrashed around. I'm like, how did they mess this up so much? Come on.
I am very thankful that I've only had, I would say, one negative experience being interviewed on another person's podcast. Frankly, before we even hit the record button, I was already feeling uncomfortable. And it's just when I'm cuddling a person, I am so much better at enforcing my boundaries, but I'm still very new to being a podcast guest. And so I know I shouldn't beat myself up for not ending the interview right then and there. But the problem I had with the interviewer was, I feel like he was just asking hot women to appear on his podcast so he has an opportunity to chat to hot women for free. Maybe it's arrogant for me to refer to myself as a hot woman on my own podcast. Yeah, male podcast hosts need to stop viewing interviews as a way to date women for free.
Yeah, no, I agree on that one. That hasn't been my experience, actually. I have had some poor podcast experience in the past where it seemed like we were on board. We talked about it beforehand. I decided I was a yes. Afterwards, I saw I looked at how he wanted to advertise, and he checked in with me, thankfully. And I was just like, can you pick a different clip? That one sounds like you're about to trigger all of your people because the way you cut it, it sounds like clients violate my boundaries all the time. And that's not true. That's just how you cut it there. It was very bizarre.
I grew up with the internet. I got social media at such a young age. I am grateful that I did not have social media for my cuddler persona until many years into the work. My socials are mainly promoting my podcast. I would classify it as client-facing social media, but it's less like, here's my face, you want to cuddle me? And more like, listen to this podcast. And so I'd imagine that I go through very different things than what you go through. I have this one acquaintance who's a professional professional cuddler in Reno, Nevada. She mainly just posts selfies and her Instagram is private. And I have contacted my regulars saying, this is a friend of mine who I do doubles with. Would you like to book a duo cuddle session with us? And they'll be like, that sounds great. Let me just add her on Instagram. And then, a few days go by and then she doesn't, accept their request. And then they'll come to me and be like, how come she hasn't accepted my friend request? You need to send me pictures of her face right now. And I am not in charge of her social media. I don't know if this is something that frequently happens to people with traditional client-facing cuddler socials. Social media has transformed our industry in some ways for the better and in some ways for the worst. And so I don't think you need to have social media in order to be a successful professional cuddler. But if someone was telling you, I'm thinking about creating social media accounts for my cuddler persona, what would you tell them in preparation? Because it's very different from just setting up an account on a cuddle website.
So I think this might be where our lived experiences are kind of start to differ a lot, because I kind of went a different way. The first year that I was doing cuddling, I didn't tell pretty much anybody that I was doing it. I was just basically me online as is normally. And then I got a humongous article written about me. The first one it was through the Penny Hoarder. They were going to put me on the front page of the Penny Hoarder for like 2 days. They get 1 million hits a month. I'm like, oh, everybody's going to see this. Somebody's going to send the link and send it to my conservative parents and be like, do you know what your daughter is doing? So I was like, you know what? The floodgates are going to go open, because I didn't have any concept or idea about a persona. Because in my head, I was like, I never used a persona. I use my real name. I know that there's a lot of people that think that's unsafe, but for me, I'm like, I would much rather people know who they're getting into. That's a terrible way to put it. Let me rephrase that. I want people to know that I'm not just putting on an act. And I know that's not the case with people with personas either. I think there is a level of legal distrust in a way, because the idea of using a persona kind of implies that maybe we don't want them to know who we really are, because there may be something we're doing behind the scenes I know that's not true for people that use personas, but I kind of just decided very early on that I was going to be out about, this is me and this is who I am and this is what I do. And I kind of just integrate that all together. So I don't really have socials that are completely separate from my personal and my business. They're kind of integrated almost as one. Like my Snuggle with Sam one was my personal one that I just changed the handle to, because I wasn't really using Instagram at the time anyways all that much. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'll just do that and turn it into a business account, because I also wanted to be like, okay, this is the real life of Sam Varnerin and whatnot. I did change my name on Facebook because I did notice there was some creepy men reaching out to me being like, hey, I saw this article about you and wanted to know if you were interested in a mutually beneficial arrangement. I'm like, so you decided to DM me on the one social page that's not blatantly all of my business stuff because you think that you're going to get around all... No, that's not what I want at all. I do maintain a little bit of privacy. As far as somebody that's trying to set up a persona, though, I'm really not... I don't have any lived experiences around that to share that would be beneficial for somebody. I would say that that's an area that my mentorship would be absolutely useless for. So if somebody's looking for help in that respect, I would have to point them somewhere else, like you.
This is out of left field, but I am a huge fan of the TV show Survivor. I want to go on that show so badly, but one of the questions they ask you is, what job do you want to tell the world that you work? In order to do Survivor, I would have to use my legal name, which is fine, but I so badly want to say I'm a cuddle therapist because I feel like that would bring a lot of visibility to our line of work. But then also I wouldn't feel safe because I don't want people in the cuddle sphere to find out what my legal name is. And it makes me sad because there's this push and pull. Like, yes, I want more visibility, but also with more visibility, there's more nastiness. I commend you because you seem like a very patient person. When I get rude comments on TikTok, you respond with so much eloquence, whereas I just do not have the energy for that. I just go, please rate and review my podcast. And if they respond again, I'll be like, please rate and review my podcast. And it's not that I'm trying to get more, I don't know, bumps in the algorithm. I genuinely do not have the mental capacity to try to convert rude people.
Oh, yeah. And quite frankly, for the most part, I usually don't spend a lot of time on that anyways. When I see something, I usually take a pause and I'm like, do I have the energy to do this? What is the benefit of me doing this? Usually the benefit is I won't walk away and still be angry about it an hour later. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes now to say this, get it out of my head because, yeah, protecting my energy is important, but also I'm from Massachusetts. Masshole is a real thing on and off the road. I'm going to try to dissipate that anger as fast as I can. And if it means responding as eloquently as I can and briefly sometimes, then I'm going to do that, both for their benefit, but also mostly for my benefit too. One thing that I will say when people come to me and want to do cuddle therapy and they also do some form of sex work, I'm super pumped because I know that they're going to be super solid with boundaries right from the get-go. They have a lot of lived experiences with dealing with men in particular, but also they probably have a lot of more compassion for women too, and many other genders as well. The thing that worries me is when they start mixing the two together. So if somebody were to come to me from sex work, I would say use a different persona for cuddling if you're going to use a persona. Because when you start mixing the two, it's very hard to decouple them. So I have a theory that because this persona is mixed with, and you are open about this, that it is harder to decouple that and not reveal who you actually are without doxing yourself.
I used to keep those personas separate. I used to go by Marlene on Cuddle Comfort back when Cuddle Comfort wasn't so ban happy. I wasn't on any other Cuddle websites. I didn't have like a domain website for me. I purely was going by Marlene on Cuddle Comfort. I deleted my first Cuddle Comfort account because I had met so many people who violated me, and the moderators of Cuddle Comfort didn't do anything. And so I just wanted to scrub everything away. And I have thought, okay, well, if I publish a book about professional cuddling, am I going to go by a pen name? Am I going to go by Marlene? Oh my gosh, writing a book is so difficult. And so it racks my brain. Like, I just started considering maybe I should just start with an ebook and do the whole physical copy distribution down the line, because it's a very demanding job. I do agree with you. It's a lot safer to use two different names if you're professional cuddling and doing sex work. I will say, I don't need to defend myself against every person who tries to insult me by calling me a sex worker. I don't think it's shameful to be a sex worker. And so having different social media accounts for my sex work stuff and for my podcast stuff has been super beneficial, because I get a lot of sex workers on my socials being like, hey, I'm an erotic masseuse, but I would like to get into professional cuddling. Can you direct me to some resources? And so then I can direct them to my podcast socials, which I just talk about professional cuddling. I don't really talk about sex work, and I don't really show my face. This is not me throwing shade against sex workers, but if you're a sex worker on social media, regardless of if you only follow other sex workers or if you don't, there's like drama every single day. It's not good to be absorbing all those internet wars. When I go on my podcast social media, yeah, every now and then I see stuff that is triggering, but it's nothing like the internet flame wars I see on my other socials. The advice I would give to someone who wants to do sex work and professional cuddling under the same name, I would say it's still beneficial to create two different social media accounts just so you can have that peace of mind.
I will say this, a couple years ago after Sesta Fosta was in effect, Cuddle Comfort did get spooked about how much responsibility they would have if trafficking did happen on their site, which it most likely would not because of their requirements for being 18. But they did make a very particular requirement that, like, if you also do sex work, we love you, we want to support you, you're too big of a liability, we can't have you on our site, even if what you're doing here is purely platonic work. And that was a bold stance, and that was, I think it was a choice. I don't know how I feel about it, but also knowing the side of trying to run a site for multiple people on it and not being able to control them, by the way, because we can't control what other people do, but being held liable for their actions at such a massive level and of such a high financial risk, I can see why they did it.
So one of my questions for you is, you are one of the few people I can name who has both done running an agency and also done running a cuddle school. So how do they compare and contrast?
Agency is a very loose term for what it was that I did. I think I took on 2 people and tried to put advertising towards them. The main difference between mentoring and teaching other cuddlers and then having an agency for other cuddlers is that for the agency, you are taking a lot more responsibility for getting business for your cuddlers, for making sure that they maintain a certain level of quality assurance. In the case of how I wanted to do it, I wanted to make sure that they were safe. So I would do a texting check-in and check-out. And sometimes if anything safety-wise came up, they would also reach out to me. That was stressful as one person. No one person should run an agency like that, even just for 2 people. School side of things, it's a little different because the responsibility of what they do is not something that I take on. I'm giving them the tools to then go use and make their own so that they can grow their practice. It feels like it's a lot more responsibility for a lot of people. Most people don't want to do that when they're thinking about going into professional cuddling. They want to go to an agency because then they don't have to think about marketing and they can just show up for their sessions and get paid whatever the amount is. With the agency I first worked with, they took 50%. I got paid $40 an hour. It was a lot, but I never had to worry about marketing. For the time period that I was in and how burnt out I was in other areas of my life, that worked for me. When I switched to trying to build my own practice and learning all the skills to do that, it was a lot of work. But at the end of the day, I got to keep that money. I was in control of the overhead costs. So it made a bigger difference because I got a bigger pay raise, but I was also responsible for the valleys in fluctuating income too.
All these memories of me working for a Snuggle Salon are flooding back to me because, yes, I was making so much less money, or so fewer money, much less money than working independently, but it was nice to have someone do all the marketing for me. And I was recently interviewed for this other podcast. The episode hasn't been released yet, but he asked me, what are the demographics of your clients? And I said, I do get clients from all ages, but back when I was at an agency, the agency attracted a lot of people, I would say 40 and up. The agency, they mainly advertised through Facebook and Google. And I'm pretty sure most people my age are not going to think, oh, I should definitely hire this professional cuddler because I saw their ad on Google or Facebook. And so that's my theory. I don't know if that's correct, but I don't have any other theories.
I don't know if too many people buy just from an ad. There is a marketing law, I believe it's the rule of 7, and I kind of live by that it's the exposures that help. So they might see the ad, click on it out of curiosity. They might not hire, but it's back in their head, and then the retargeting, it'll show up again. If they sign up for a newsletter, now the company's in control of when that next exposure is, assuming that they end up in the inbox and not in the spam. But then they can give them more information and be in their mind more. Once that 7th time they kind of pop up, that's on average. That's usually when somebody's ready to buy. So those exposures can happen quickly. Some of those exposures happen over a longer term. I've had somebody know I existed for 3 years before he finally decided to come in for a session. Sometimes it's longer. Sometimes it's more than 7 exposures, but it's an average.
I'm one of those people where I dislike it when a client says, oh yeah, I've been following you for years. That to me sounds like they developed this parasocial relationship with me. And so they've built me up in their head, but I'm not this whimsical fantasy that they formulated in their head.
I think it depends. Backtracking to the question you asked me before about agencies and the education for cuddlers, and you touched upon it by what you said, actually, that with the agency, they're in control of the marketing and they bring you the clients, but that means that they're in control of the marketing and you don't know what clients they're attracting. When you're more in control of that, which I think that's kind of the part that a lot of independent cuddlers really struggle with, is like, how do I attract the type of clients that I really want? But once we can unlock that, there's so much, and like it's endless how you can help and serve the people that need you the most. And that's really, really powerful, and why I've leaned really hard in that direction for people. Honestly, like, yes, Facebook ads, Google ads maybe might get you those exposures. Going on certain social media maybe will get you those exposures. Maybe being on Reddit might attract a certain kind of person. It's a combination of all of those and showing up as you are. Moving forward to what you just said, I know that's like 10 topics forward. I think that it's important for people to spend time time deciding if this particular person is for them. When we start going to the point of idolizing and the parasocial relationships, that is kind of worrisome. If it's like, I've been following you for years, but I'm not ready, that makes sense. I've been following you for years and I love your stuff and you're so awesome. And I'm like, okay, when are we doing a session? So it's an interesting balancing act though, because I've seen people, and I tell people when they go on Cuddlist too, when they sign up for Cuddlist, I've seen so many people, they're like, it doesn't work. I haven't gotten any clients. And I'm like, well, how long have you been on Cuddlist? Well, I've been there for 2 weeks and I haven't gotten a single lead. It's only been there for 2 weeks. You're brand new on this site. There's probably people that have been on this site every couple weeks and then they see you once, but you're brand new. They don't know if you're going to stick around. Sure, you're trained, but like, they need to know that you're not just going to jump ship any moment. And that's another thing too. It's much better than it used to be. But like when I first started, the average tenure at Snuggle Buddies, the agency I was at before, was 6 months. Most people did not last past 6 months. If they did, it was a big deal. That's how I was at one point the top cuddler in Massachusetts, which was really just through their site, because I was just there for longer than anybody else. People came in and out. And so I think there's still a little bit of that, which is kind of the danger of just being so easy to get started that, well, I don't know if I'm going to stick with this because it's so easy to get started, but it's also so easy to quit just because you can get started and not really think about going in, which I know for me, that's kind of almost hypocritical for me to say because that's exactly what I did. I didn't think, I just saw that it existed, found the first site and signed up. Nobody should do that. That's exactly what I did. Learn from my mistakes. I am grateful it worked out in the end, but it should not put yourself into that situation. Do your research. I have so much ADHD and it is a Friday at 3 p.m. in my time zone. So this is where my brain is like going in 3 different directions in a Porsche.
My boyfriend has ADHD, and so I recently bought English muffins for Eggs Benedict. I only used half of a English muffin for an Eggs Benny, and he literally just ate all of the rest. Not even with butter. He told me that his ADHD brain made him eat all of the English muffins as is.
My ADHD thing, and this is just me now putting this on your podcast just to prove just how imperfect I am. So if anybody's putting me on a pedestal, this is where you take me off of it. My ADHD food of comfort is uncooked ramen. I'll break it into pieces. It's totally terrible for your stomach, but I just like, oh, it just feels good in my mouth. Oh my gosh. So if anybody had any respect for me, hopefully it's gotten knocked down a little bit and it's like, no, I'm kind of weird. It's okay. Like, I'm not a perfect human being by any means, and I don't claim to be.
I see pros and cons with our line of work being so, how do I put it, understated. First, I have to tell people and explain what it is that I do, and then I can move on to marketing myself to clients. And at first, I thought, oh, this is so terrible. Other people in established industries, they don't have to do this. They just go out and start marketing themselves. And so I am constantly guest speaking on other podcasts, and I don't expect anyone to listen to my interviews and think I am going to book her. My goal is literally just to educate. I'm not doing this to bring in clients. If clients find out about me through those interviews, that's wonderful. But I am honestly having so much fun. And it's hard to remember your worth without attaching your capitalistic value to your worth. And it's so worthwhile, in my opinion, to speak to complete strangers for an hour about what I do, because I've spoken with so many people who I don't think would ever pay a professional cuddler for their time. But even though professional cuddling is not for them, they're still very respectful. And when you only interact with the cuddle sphere through social media, you can get sucked into this black hole of thinking, if another person would never associate with the cuddle industry, then they're allowed to be rude to me. But that's not true. There are a ton of people out there who would never go to a cuddle party, but they still will be respectful of people who do. And when I was speaking with Jasmine, I ended the interview with, how can people with no affiliation to the cuddle world be allies to us?
I would say that you're doing great work, by the way, Felicity. I appreciate you for getting on those podcasts with people that may be curious but confused and not sure if they really want to do something like that, or probably will never do that. You don't know, but they're learning from you and they're trying to understand why it's important for other people. And that's honestly the best thing, that people that want to be allies, either for the industry as a whole, for their loved ones, for other people that that they see that might have the skill sets to be in this work, to point it out to others that this is a resource that exists and that it's a legitimate thing that may be able to help them. I always take the approach in my work that I am here to help people. If I'm not the solution for them, that's fine. I'm glad that we determined that, and I hope they find a solution, and I'll try to point them in a different direction. I've turned down clients that I've been on calls with, and I was like, I think who you need to see is an escort. That's the direction you should probably go in, because what you're describing isn't really something that I can help you with, or I don't think you're quite ready to come in for a session yet based on what you're telling me. And then I've had people that are like, they need a surrogate partner therapist instead, so I've put them in that direction. But like, there is so much about our work that's nuanced. There's so much about it that, like, if the other people know that it at least exists, and at least a couple pieces to look for in other people that might actually need that, especially because some of these people that we help are in really bad places and nobody knows it. I've been with people that were on the verge of unaliving themselves. It's sad because there's only so much that we can do as cuddle therapists, but sometimes that space when nothing else works is so vital. Just even a mentioning that it exists, even if it's not something for you, sharing that you met somebody that like this, sharing that you interviewed somebody like this, just with the people around you so they know it exists. Because some of my first clients that came from my business was because I went to a networking event and the tech bros shit on me. They went back to their buddies and was like, oh, you will not believe who I met. I met a professional cuddler at this networking event. Isn't that ridiculous? Meanwhile, their friends are like, oh, you don't say. What was her name? Yeah, that's really weird. And so they'd come in as client. The way that relationship is, they don't know that. Learning about this to try to be champions and say, like, it's not a weird thing, or at least know that people have heard of this and that they accept that this exists and that there's a need for it so that people can find it. I've also had clients that have come in and they asked around, was like, I've been kind of hesitant about coming in because when I started talking about this with other people around me, no one's ever heard of this before. No one I know has ever seen a cuddle therapist before. And I'm like, but they still had the courage to come in. We need to be talking about this more so that people know it's an option for them.
This has made me a better person, and it's made me a much curiouser person. I love hearing about esoteric jobs. Like the other day, I found out what a death doula is. I knew what a birth doula was, but I didn't know that death doulas were a thing. And I started thinking, I want that for when I die. I want someone to like help my family process the grief of losing me. And I've even talked about it to my boyfriend, and he was like, yeah, that's nice. Just don't, unalive yourself. Not only has this job made me more, I guess, open-minded with my clients, it's also it's given me this spark to what are some other jobs that are super esoteric but need more positive representation.
Absolutely. Also, I highly recommend that you talk with Grace here of Graceful Cuddles. She is a death doula as well as a life coach and cuddle therapist.
Yeah, follow her on Facebook. She seems nice.
She's great. She's super great.
Those are all the questions I have today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've super appreciated this. Oh my gosh. I was listening to some podcast episodes that you did earlier and I was just like,
oh gosh, I'm cringing.
No, it's great. Especially the research that you're doing across like different countries. Like, I mean, heck, Felicity, like, sure, I helped with the International Standard Code of Ethics, but it was like international because we got UK cuddle therapists involved. Like when we do Cuddle Expo again, we need to update it and get more people involved. Like you are a big resource. I would invite you to raise your hand and be like, hey, can I be a part of that conversation? You have a wealth of knowledge from all of this. So I appreciate you for doing that.
I know that there will come a day where I have researched the cuddle industry in every sovereign nation, but I don't think of that day with glum. I think when that day happens, I'll be able to pitch a Wikipedia page for professional cuddling. I just created an intro for my podcast, and in that intro, I do say, why is there a Wikipedia page for cuddle parties but not professional cuddling? I mean, I looked at the cuddle party Wikipedia page. It's not that long. Or I don't think I can expand it, but I can definitely write a Wikipedia page for professional cuddling.
We tried that before. It got rejected. They won't let people in the industry write a Wikipedia. We can edit it once it's up. The person that needs to post it needs to be unassociated with the industry. I know it's such a lame rule from Wikipedia.
To wrap up, please plug in whatever it is you want to plug in, like email, socials, website, have at it.
Well, first of all, assuming that most of your people are either clients or cuddle therapists or aspiring cuddle therapists, I I'm going to start with the people that want to do this work or are already in this work. I have a freebie. It's 32 questions that you should be asking yourself on how to design your business so that you're running it in a way that you feel like is actually in alignment with how you want to, that you have your procedures down, that your safety, basic safety stuff is accounted for how you want to. It's often a lot of questions that people ask me, but I'm like, you should think about what the answer is for you. So you can get that workbook for free at cuddlecareer.com, and it's right on the front page, actually. As far as socials, for me, I'm more active on my Snuggle with Sam socials. I'm Snuggle with Sam on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube. I don't stream anymore. But yeah, so then Twitch, TikTok, also Snuggle with Sam. Otherwise, snugglewithsam.com.
Sign up for Sam's newsletter.
Oh, and one other thing. You mentioned it before. I wrote a book, and that's the Happy While Harboring Handbook. So especially for clients that may or may not be in the Boston area, you can get that at snugglewithsam.com/Sam's book, and that'll take you to Amazon so you can get it there. Many people have read it before coming in to see me, but even if you never do, you'll get a lot of value out of it.
I'm trying to look it up right now. Do you go by a pen name?
Nope. I'm very open about just being Samantha Varnerin.
Oh, I found it.
Awesome.
I found it. I need more books written by professional cuddlers that aren't just, here's 50 different diagrams of various cuddle positions, because I'm just so tired of that.
Yeah. I don't focus too much on the professional cuddling per se. It's kind of just about a period of my life that I'm like, here's isolation pre-pandemic, actually, with all my experiences pre-pandemic, because I got injured a year before, and then I got the okay from the surgeon. They're like, okay, you're ready to go ahead and do whatever physical activities you want. And that was the first week in March 2020.
Yay!
Great timing. I know, right? Oh, well, I tried. So I'm happy that I was able to produce this and be like, okay, let's help other people, because everybody's about to isolate kind of like what I just did, except for longer, much longer than we could have ever predicted.
Wow, what a discussion. Even editing this episode has been a journey for me. This June has been busy. I went to Baltimore, Napa Valley, San Francisco, of course, my home, and Riverside, and in a couple of days, I'm going to be in Vallejo, and then a few more days, I'm going to be in Toronto. I'm all over the place in the Bay and in North America. No, I sadly did not get to meet up with Jasmine Simone or Sam Varnerin when I was on the East Coast. Please check this episode's description for more information, not just about me, but my lovely interview guest. Thank you so much, beautiful listeners, for listening. If you're one of my patrons, thank you so much for supporting my podcast. I do not accept sponsorships. Your patronage is not only supporting me, but the current and aspiring cuddle professionals who listen to Pro Cuddle Hustle. If you haven't already, please leave reviews, preferably positive ones, on Spotify, YouTube, Listen Notes, Castbox, Podchaser, and Podcast Addict. Now, I'm not getting paid to say this, but unlike Spotify, Good Pods is a review-based app, not for professional cuddlers, but for podcasts in general. You can listen to podcast episodes on their app, but 99% of the time I use it to review episodes of other people's podcasts. If you are a podcast host, let's follow each other on Good Pods. It's pretty much the only social networking app for us. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you leave a review for me on Apple Podcasts or wherever, please screenshot your review, put it on social media, and tag me to increase the likelihood of me reading it. And who knows, maybe in a future episode, I'll read your review out loud. I also manage 2 different Facebook groups, Ask a Professional Cuddler and Professional Cuddlers and SW Only. Please only join the latter if you fit into one or both categories. Follow Pro Cuddle Hustle on all socials, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, and Twitter. I'm the moderator of r/professional cuddling. Yes, I know that Reddit is kind of on fire right now because the CEO is making a bunch of dumb choices, just like the CEO of Twitter. I have not spoken to the other moderator of r/professional cuddling about what to do moving forward. I do not plan on turning the subreddit private or archiving it because I am so busy for June 2023. I am not accepting Fly Me to You requests. If you're one of my regulars, then I've probably contacted you for our last snuggle session of the month. If you're in the Bay Area, area and you would like to book a snuggle session with me sometime in the middle of July, please email me your screening information. I always do screening before a deposit. If you want to be interviewed, I am currently updating my Calendly. It's a scheduling software. It's very easy to use. Please be a professional cuddler and or a sex worker. And before I forget, snuggle clients, please be vaccinated for COVID and please have a booster. If you want to book a 1 hour with me, but then another person wants to book a 24-hour, I will prioritize the person who's paying me more because this is a business. I run a cuddle practice. Catch y'all later. You have been listening to episode 28 of Felicity Azara's podcast,